Good evening. I will now call to order the Town Planning Advisory Committee meeting on November 25th, 2024 at 6 p.m. I would like to begin by acknowledging that we are in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. We also acknowledge that people of African descent have been in Nova Scotia for over 400 years. We honor and offer gratitude to those ancestors of Mi'kmaq and African descent who came before us to this land. Everyone has received the agenda for tonight's meeting, and I would ask you to review that and add any items to the agenda that you wish to add, and otherwise, if someone would like to move to accept the agenda. Councillor Graham?
I'd like to add an agenda item, and it's a discussion regarding the Juniper Street development.
Thank you. Can we put that as the new item 5 on the agenda?
Thank you.
Okay, great. And then new business will move to 6 and so forth. Any other items to add to the agenda? If not, can I receive a motion, please? Moved by Councillor McGrath. All those in favor of approving the agenda with the one change made, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying nay. Motion carried. Thank you. Now we will move to the approval of the minutes from our last meeting, which was September 16th, 2024. If anyone has any amendments to be made to the minutes, please let us know, and otherwise, if someone would like to move to approve them. Moved by Councillor Graham. Do I have a seconder? Seconder by Ms. Sarabell. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. 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 Any opposed, please signify by saying nay. Motion carried. Thank you. So next we will move to the housekeeping amendments, and these are going to be reviewed and gone through by Mr. Fox. And these are some small changes, not substantive in nature, but I guess we would call them typos maybe sometimes, or other changes of words which don't affect the content but do need to be clarified before the committee. So I will turn it over to our Director of Planning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just in terms of presentation on your screen there, so this document, the town's new planning documents, have been in place since November 6, 2023. They were approved by the province in January, so they've been in effect and we've been enforcing them since January. And during that time, staff, usually what happens when you adopt the new documents is over the course of the first few months, you discover a number of issues, errors, typos, omissions, formatting problems, cross-referencing errors, that kind of thing. So we've compiled a list of those today for review of this committee. So what we're going to do is take it through. It's essentially an amendment process that we have to go through. This is the kind of the process that I'm going to be looking at for this. So it's the same process effectively as that you would go through to adopt a new planning documents, except that it's obviously not as extensive in terms of public consultation because there is no substantive changes, and most of that's already been vetted by the public through a public process. So in this case, what happens is we have the initial review by this committee. We would have a public information meeting. We're required to have that under the Municipal Government Act, so we would have a meeting where the public would be invited to attend and go through a presentation similar to what you'll be seeing today. And then we'd have, following that, assuming everything goes according to plan, things move along to a final recommendation by this committee. So we come back before this committee. You would consider input from the public at that time. Any input that we receive, we would pass that along to you as well. And then at that point, what happens is they would make the final recommendation to council. So then the amendments would proceed to a public hearing of council. And then following that, they would have a decision by the committee. And just so you're aware, with amendments to municipal planning strategy, there is, and related and land use bylaw amendments, there is no normal appeal process. So there's no UARB appeal process as part of this application, this type of amendment. So anyway, just to get into sort of the meat of it, hopefully you've had a chance to review the report that was sent out. I should note that there's a few changes here that came about as a result of feedback that I received during to the initial amendments that went out. So I had some feedback from members of the committee. And so there is some new changes to these set of amendments that are being presented here today. I have highlighted which ones those are. You'll see that in a moment. But again, there's no substantive changes here really. It's just some clarification, things like that. So I'll go through these pretty quickly. If there's specific questions, I'll trust you to someone to speak up and stop me as the case may be, if you have issues with one of them or you want some clarification on any of it. So most of them, as I said, as the chair mentioned, most of them are pretty straightforward typos, that kind of thing. So there's not shouldn't be a lot of discussion around them, but if you do have questions, please let me know. So the first amendment there is chapter 4, page 6 of the planning documents. It's, what we're looking at there is essentially a duplicated policy. So we're just looking to amend chapter 4 by removing some duplicated policies that are in there twice. So UC 14, UC 16, and UC 19. Next one there is policy numbers require updating. So because we remove some policies, then the subsequent policies in that same chapter required renumbering. So there's just been some numbering sequence change to reflect the new numbering sequence. Next one we have on the list is there's an incorrect policy area reference in this on chapter 4, page 14. So this is just, we're looking to the policy here makes reference to the downtown commercial, and you can see it here in the body of the amendment, downtown commercial, but it should have said urban corridor, and that's just to to align with, it's a urban core policy, so it should be making reference to the urban corridor. Next one is another incorrect policy area reference. So this one is making reference to the urban growth area, but it's a general residential policy, so it should be making reference to a general residential policy area. Next one is a typographical error, and this is just to amend some policy headings to replace some current policy headings, and they're listed there. So that's just to replace some ones that are mistakenly or labeled things like urban corridor and downtown, urban corridor, downtown core, when they're actually in the regional service designation. So they just need to be updated to be regional service policy numbers as opposed to the others that are listed there. Next one is a typographical error or omission. So this is just it's also to clarify some of the language, but so it shall be a policy council to generally apply the regional service policy area instead of the urban corridor policy area. So that's just another mistaken reference to the wrong policy area. Next one is typographical error, so number 7, and this is just a typo. So we're just looking at, it should say, instead of saying with the regional service, it should say within. So you see the text there in italics and bold. Next one is another typographical error. It just needs an extra word. That should have been in there. It was not, so that's just been added. Next one is just in terms of an error to, I think it's just to clarify some of the text here, so it shouldn't actually be a typographical error, but such as those permitted in the general residential zone will be permitted as of right. It's already mentioned. Yeah, thank you. So it is a typo, I guess. It's listed twice. Yeah, thank you. Redundant statement, so that needed to be removed. The next one is misplaced policy. So amend Chapter 11 by moving existing policy environmental service from its current position. It's just the policy didn't make any sense where it was located, so it's been relocated to another area in the same section. So it's not deleting the policy, it's just moving it to a heading where it makes more sense. Next one, policy area, policy numbers require updating, so we had to renumber some policies, ES9, ES10, to maintain the numbering sequence because I relocated a policy in the last amendment. The next one is to update subsection heading to make it clear that it's what it's actually talking about. So it's not about accommodating development in flood risk areas, it's about development in flood risk areas. So it just needed to be clarified to make sure that what's actually in that section, 12.2.4, is accurate. So again, it's not about accommodating development, it's about regulating development in the flood risk areas. In some cases, that would include a prohibition, so that's why it needs to be clarified. And the next one is a reference to a non-existent or incorrect policy area. So yeah, this was, so amend this section to, just to make sure that the correct policy areas are referenced. There's no more limited residential. This is a remnant from the old plan, so there's no limited residential designation anymore. It's now downtown neighborhood policy area. Same thing with, this one talks about general residential or commercial. Just needs to be clear that we're talking about urban corridor or downtown core. So these are some remnants of the old plan that needed to be corrected that were missed. Same thing with the bottom there as well. Next one is reference to incorrect policy area. So this, we're looking for an amendment to policy IM 12 so that we're going to not refer to the downtown. This isn't what we call it anymore. It's called downtown neighborhood, not downtown residential. So it just needs to be updated to reflect the current planning policy areas names. Any questions so far? Are we all okay following along with? Yeah, okay. Next one, 15, is an incorrect incorrect cross-reference. So this is looking to make a reference to policy IM 31, which is incorrect. It should say IM 32. So that's all that is. The next one's a new one, which is updated and complete policy reference. So right now, I think it needs to, this is a table at the beginning of the plan, which makes reference to some policies, and the list that's currently there is incomplete and is actually mistaken, so it needs to refer to some other policy areas. So we're just changing that to include the ones that are listed there. Next one is typographical error. So that's just the spelling. So this is a new one as well. So it should say, instead of quite residential street, it should say quiet residential street. So it's just a typo. Next one's a typographical error as well. It says, instead of saying policy, it says policies. This is a new one as well. So it just needs to be changed to policy IM 11 instead of policies IM 11. Yeah, apologize. It's probably best if you follow along with the one on the screen. Sorry. So you see there's a little new symbol here. So when you see that, you'll know I'm talking about a new one. So 17 and 18 are new. And then this is one of the existing ones. So this is that's in your report. So there's just a property that's actually within the Heritage District that was mistakenly zoned urban corridor in the, not zoned, but in the urban corridor policy area. It should have been included in the downtown neighborhood policy area, which is the policy area that responds or reflects the Heritage District. So for the most part, there are some properties within the downtown neighborhood policy area that aren't in the district, but every property that's in the Heritage District is supposed to be in a downtown neighborhood policy area and not the urban corridor policy area. So you'll see this property here, which is 74 Duke Street, was mistakenly included in the pink, the urban corridor, and what we're proposing is that it be moved back, or be moved to where it should be, which is in the downtown neighborhood policy area. Next one, so this is moving on now into the land use bylaw. So those were all municipal planning strategy amendments. So the next ones are all land use bylaw text amendments. First one there is we have an outdated definition. We have mini home parks defined, which we don't reference in the plan anymore, and that's to do with building code changes. It's kind of an outdated concept. The next one there is need to align requirement with the National Building Code. So we just had a requirement that talked about a 1.5 meter setback. The building code actually talks about 1.2 meters or 3.9 feet, and that's just to be consistent with the National Building Code. So it's not a substantial change, but it does reflect what is required in the code. Clarification needed regarding the use of shipping containers as accessory structures and dwellings. So there's some confusion around the way this clause was currently worded. And what I wanted to do here was clarify exactly what was intended. And So there is a minor change here because there was some need to, the way it was written was a little bit confusing. So instead was quite a lot confusing. It kind of impacted the way that it could be interpreted. So what we're talking about here is that if there's a shipping container, so basically I'll read the whole section to get a sense for what's being changed as part of the new change. Is a shipping container may be used or occupied as an accessory building or as an accessory dwelling unit provided where the shipping container is within the downtown commercial, general residential, urban corridor zone. It shall not be situated in a front or flanking yard or between the main building and any public street. So this is a pretty confusing section of this shipping container section, but the accessory buildings section is also pretty confusing. So the whole section of the plan is a bit complicated, but the changes that are being made here clarify what was agreed upon at when council originally discussed this and what it was brought before the planning advisory committee and council when we went through the amendments. So it's not a substantial change; it's clarification only.
Mr. Fox? Yep. Oh, I think we have Councillor Thomas wishing to speak, and then...
Yeah, I was trying to speak to the last amendment that you talked about, and that's item 2, in which you talked about the accessory building and the side the rear or side yard, in which case the accessory building may be situated. This is changed from 1.5 meters to 1.2 meters, and from 4.9 feet to 3.9 feet. Mm-hmm. Okay? And you'd mentioned that this is the National Building Code, but this sort of exceeds National Building Code in a way, in the sense that it's farther apart, and so you don't have to meet the National Building Code. You can meet or exceed it, isn't that correct? So
that's correct.
So we could leave it, or it could be changed. I mean, it's only a foot. It was just the principle I wanted to find out. Do you, in other words, you have to meet it, but you could also exceed it in the sense of
Correct.
how
There's
far
nothing wrong with, that's correct. There's nothing wrong with having something in excess of what the building code has set out. It's just that this was intended always to reflect that was the intent of this section, is to reflect what's in, because it talks about having openings. So if you have no opening, the way the National Building Code's written, if you have an unprotected opening, then you have to be a certain distance, like a window. You have to be a certain distance from the property line. If you have no openings, you can go down to the distance that's listed there.
Right.
So so really what this is to be bringing this requirement into comply, or to be consistent with the National Building Code, to reduce confusion around the issue of what the setback is.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine. I just wanted clarity on that.
But
Thank you.
absolutely, the committee can say, no, leave it alone because we like that extra foot. It's just, it is a little bit odd because it's inconsistent with what it says in the National Building Code, which is what clearly this was trying to match when it was written.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, did you have a question?
Sorry, Mr. Fox, Councillor Graham is in the queue.
Okay.
Okay. I'm sorry, I am still confused on this one. Is the objective of this bylaw to make the shipping container completely invisible from the street? Is that the goal of this?
So you're talking about issue, I guess.
I'm on issue 3.
Yeah, okay.
Sorry, I should have clarified that. But is that the objective, to make it completely invisible from the street? With
Yeah,
the bylaw?
if it's an accessory building, then the idea is in certain zones that we didn't really want it to be in the front or in the side yard where it's, so it can't be the way it's written is it says, you can't have it in the front or flanking yard or between the main building and any public street, just to be extra clear. So what it's saying is it has to be in a rear yard.
In a rear yard?
Or it can also be in a side yard, but the side yard, you would have to meet all it would have to be in a side yard and meet setbacks. So it's essentially, so it's the difference between a side yard and a flanking yard.
Yeah.
Flanking yard is a corner lot. So if you have a corner lot, you have a front yard, which faces one street. You have a flanking yard, which faces the other street. And then you have a side yard, which faces an interior lot. And then you have a rear yard, which also faces to sort of the property behind you effectively. So that's your rear yard. So it's a saying that any lot abutting a public street, in those 3 zones, you can't have a shipping container as an accessory building.
Okay, I followed that.
Yep.
Thank you. So I don't understand. So have we restricted the use completely in the downtown neighborhood zone?
The issue is you can actually use. We agreed when we went through this or council agreed when they went through this when we did the plan review and adoption, was what they agreed to was to allow shipping containers because effectively they have to be converted to meet the National Building Code. So in order to so you can do some pretty interesting things with shipping containers if you upgrade them, and you just have to go up to Seek Wilderness to see what that looks like. So they can be very high quality accommodations. You can do really, really cool stuff with them. So the idea was, no, we're not going to stop that. As long as you meet the National Building Code, you're fine to use a shipping container. But you have to go through code compliance, which means you have to put in a foundation. There has to be plumbing. You'd have to upgrade the structure to withstand climate and all those things. Because shipping containers, as soon as you cut into them, you destroy their structural integrity. So you end up having to do a bunch of structural improvements. Those all have to meet National Code. Has to be insulated to meet the National Building Code. All those things would come into play.
I remember all those discussions.
Yeah.
So I'm confused then by 3C, number 2. The shipping container is not situated in the downtown neighborhood zone.
And that has to do with, we didn't feel it was appropriate, or council, I shouldn't say. It feels hard to separate myself from it sometimes, but council didn't feel it was separate. It was something that should be permitted in the heritage areas of town. Because it is certainly hard to make a shipping container, even what you do with it, make it look like it's going to fit into a downtown neighborhood like a heritage district.
So why are we not identifying it as the heritage district?
Because the downtown neighborhood zone is essentially the same thing. There is some variations, but it's mostly every heritage district is in a downtown neighborhood zone.
Okay, thank you for the clarification.
Mr. McGrath, and then we'll have Mr. Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Fox, just on the topic of the shipping containers, I don't think it's in the amendment, so I don't want to take us too far off our path here. But do we have bylaws on how the shipping containers can look? I understand you can't necessarily make a shipping container look like it belongs in a heritage neighborhood, but we do have bylaws dictating how the container can look, correct?
Not really. The bylaws would fall under any other bylaw in the sense of if it's dilapidated or if it's not painted, it would fall under the dangerous unsightly premises or minimum housing building maintenance standards bylaws.
All right, so it would have to be painted or clapboarded or
Yep.
something. So that's sort of what I'm getting at. I guess
Yep.
there are rules about how it can look. You can't just have a rusty shipping container sitting in your backyard. Even if it's been insulated on the outside and foundation and plumbed and all that stuff, you can't just have like a rusty.
Well, you think you would have to take it, the committee would have to make a call if the building inspectors didn't feel that it was unsightly or dangerous, then the dangerous and unsightly committee would have to make the call as to whether or not they felt it was appropriate to be rusty container. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Fox, I'm aware of one, and perhaps more, but I'm aware of one that is currently not meeting these standards. Yeah, will that be grandfathered in, or will they have to be asked to bring it into compliance with the?
I think I know the one that you're referring to, and it's been there for some time, but I don't believe it would be grandfathered. I think that one, this is not a new requirement. This
Right.
requirement not to use shipping containers isn't new to this plan,
Right.
in the Heritage District or in the downtown neighborhood zone. Or what used to be called the neighborhood residential or Heritage residential zone, R7, whatever that was. Or R6, it was another one which I don't think either zone permitted shipping containers to be located in the front yard as an accessory building. So I think I know the one you're referring to, and it's been like that, and no one's ever complained.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Okay, so we're good to move forward. So the next one I have there is also another new one for those of you following along the report. So this is new in the sense that there's a slight change. It was pointed out to me then that it's also the same error exists in table 3.7. So, and it's just basically the reference is to a unit as opposed to, or sorry, the reference currently is to a bedroom, and bachelor units, of course, don't have bedrooms, so it doesn't make any sense to require them to have a particular number of spaces per bedroom, so it needed to be changed to unit, and that error exists in both, currently in tables 3.6 and 3.7, and we're proposing to change that here to unit. The next one there is number 5. Oh, this is the one where the building inspector likes to laugh at me because he says there's no such thing as a 3.3 foot door. So it's 36 inches is what he's saying needs to be stated there. So, so that's industry standard doorway. Next one is, oh, it makes, the plan makes a reference to, did this in a couple of places where it makes reference to residential zoning, which isn't a thing anymore in the plan. The plan moved away from strictly residential, strictly commercial, strictly industrial, and moved into more mixed-use zones. So there is no real clear definition of what's meant by residential zones. So rather than try and define that, the recommendation here is to list the zones specifically that are being referenced. So general residential, downtown neighborhood, urban corridor, or future growth zone. And this has to do with the commercial motor vehicle parking. And it's the same thing in both A and B there. Next one is a typo, which is amend. Yeah, so so it's just, no, it's not really a typo. Sorry, it's actually an error of sort of an intent. The intent is, of course, if you have a projecting wall sign that has 2 sides, and the way it was written was that you couldn't have a wall. The size that was being prescribed it was effectively saying you could only have a one-sided projecting wall sign, which makes no sense because usually they're like blade signs that stick out perpendicular to the building face, and there's 2 sides. So we needed to double the figure there. So now it's, instead of being 0.6 meters or 12.9 feet, oh, and that's actually a mistake. It should be 1.2 meters, and I also need to double up 12.9. So that'll end up being 20, whatever that works out to be. Double that number. 25.8. 25.8, thank you. Yeah, all right. Is that clear? So we need to make that change. So Angie, can you? Yeah, okay. Next one there is inconsistent spelling. So this has to do with the words, well, with stormwater management. And there's a lot of variation even in industry, how this gets spelled. Sometimes it's 2 separate words. Sometimes it's 1 word. Trying to be consistent here and make sure that we use it. And I think it always catches with spell check as being a spelling mistake, but stormwater management, so just making the word stormwater 1 word as opposed to 2 separate words. So we're going to try and make it consistent throughout the documents and throughout the plan documents, and that's what those changes are for. So that's a new, and I say new there is because there was a number of other spots where it occurred as well. Next one is typographical error. This just mistake where there was no, the proper dimension was given in imperial, but it was not given in metric. So that just needs to be changed to 3 meters. Next one is cross-referencing error. So it just makes reference to the wrong figure. So that's been updated to figure 4.9. Next one is just a typo. It should say an office instead of a office, so that's been changed here, proposed. The next one is a missing zone reference, so this should say, and this was consistent with what was agreed upon, this came about as a result of consultation during the public engagement process during plan review, so it needs to say or another property in the urban corridor zone. So so that's a change that needs to be added to this section. Another cross-referencing error, so this, yep.
Councillor McGrath?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Fox, can we actually go back to that projecting sign? Because I just did a quick lookup because I thought I had checked this already. I do believe 1.2 meters square is 12.9 square feet. So I think the square footage was already correct. The square meterage was incorrect.
Oh, okay, yes, thank you.
So I don't want to create a new error in the plan as we go through these amendments.
Okay. All right.
If we can just
Yep.
confirm that later, it doesn't have to be
Yep.
right now, but let's just make sure before we make that change.
Okay. Okay. It's 12.9, clearly, I'll make it sure it's, yeah, okay. Where was I? Here? So each separate, this is just a clarification. Yeah, it needs to say A instead of, reference to A instead of B. So that's been changed there. And then next one is a missing zone reference in the figure. So this figure here, I think there's reference here needs to be made to the general residential zone, I believe. Yeah, so it just needed to be added to make it clear and make the diagram actually truly reflective of the policies or the regulations. Next one there is there's a new change here too, or this is a totally new amendment, I guess. Wait, was this? No. So just a mistaken reference in the version that was given to in the report. I think it said policy UC 41 and 42. It should be policy UC 40 and UC 41. So that's just a change to what was recommended. These are the correct policies here. Okay. Numbering error, the next one, number 16. So amend chapter 5. This is just to renumber some sections that were improperly numbered to be consistent with the way the document's set up in terms of subsections and clauses and that sort of thing. So that's just changing those. No real change there. Numbering errors again. Same thing, I believe. Yeah, same idea. Just to change to correct the numbering that's mistaken. Number 18, and that's shown on the next page. This is amending this regulation by adding this additional clause, which is this just had to be clarified. The current wording was problematic, so I just wanted to make sure this was clear. We're having issues with proposed conversions resulting in a number of street-facing doors, which doesn't really, this is sort of a subjective thing, but doesn't look great. So wanted to clarify, this used to be in the old plan and wanted to make sure that it was continued and carried through into the new plan. So basically what we're saying is you can't have a number of new doors when you do a residential conversion added to an old structure facing the street. Any issues with, pretty clear on that one? Okay. This is just a missing symbol in the table. So we've added let's see here, conditional use symbol to this and this comes up a few times in the document where the use may be permitted in the table, but sometimes it's subject to conditions. So there may be conditions stating that it's a certain distance from another type of residential use. There may be a condition that you're only allowed to have so many in a certain area. So there's things like that, and this just updates that to make sure that it reflects that there is conditions, but it can also be permitted as of right. And I think this one has to do with accessory dwelling. The conditions are all to do with, you can have 4 units, but if you have an accessory dwelling as part of those 4 units, there's conditions around how that can be implemented. Next one is just a mistaken zone reference. Instead of saying UC zone, it should say DN, downtown neighborhood zone. And then this one is a missing limitation on accommodation uses. So this needs to just say, I think this just had to do with making sure that accommodations, you didn't have a number of residential units permitted, and then you're allowed to have additional accommodation uses in an accessory building, for example. So because accommodation use could end up looking like an Airbnb style apartment, so it's effectively another residential use. Another residential unit, and you're adding that on top of your existing 4. So basically what this is saying, that the combined total can't be more than 4, and this is consistent with what I believe council's intent was. Just kind of closing a bit of a loophole is all.
Councillor Graham, do you have? I do. Okay, sure. Take your time.
Think it through for a second. in reference to renovating a build, or would it apply to new builds?
This has to do with an existing building.
An existing one,
Yep.
okay. Not a, that was the word I was looking for, not a conversion.
Well, it would be a conversion of an existing building.
Okay. Could you remind me then about new builds and how in this same zone? I'm trying to remember when we talked about, because it was my recollection that it was 3 units that could be, like we were talking about townhouses and row houses. This is not referencing that, is it the same?
No, this has to do with existing structures in the downtown. So this is really your heritage districts
Okay,
and
again.
and a small section of Willow Street.
Okay. If that's the only zone we're including.
Okay.
Thank you.
So the next one is just discrepancy between what's actually listed in the zone and what's shown in the table. So it should say residential up to 4 units as opposed to, and this is in the business industrial zone. So it should say up to 4 units, and there's conditions assigned to that. And that was a request that some of you may recall from the meeting where there's different industrial users were looking at putting on temporary accommodations for workers that they were bringing in. So they needed to have additional dwelling units on site. So that was put in place for that, but this is just to reflect the fact that it was 4 units and that wasn't shown in the table. The next one is an incorrect zone reference. It says regional service. It should say, in fact, business industrial. Another typographical error here. So amend the heading of subsection 10.3.4 so that it reads up to 4 units instead of up to 2 units. That's just to be, that it has to accurately reflect what's actually in the content of the subsection. So it's just a mistake in the title of the section. Another one where there's a missing symbol on the permitted uses table. So here you'll see there's conditions around, this is a pretty confusing section, but and to simplify it and put it in the table is a bit awkward, but essentially, there are conditions around, you can do a residential use in the, this is in the future growth area. You can do a multi-unit residential use between 3 and 50 units. In some cases, you can do it by site plan approval. If you don't meet there's a future growth area conceptual development plan. If you don't meet that, then you have to go through development agreement. If you do meet it and you want to do 3 to 50 units, you can actually do it by site plan approval. So both apply. So that's why there's 2 symbols and why that's been added there.
Mr. Fox, I'm just going to let Councillor Graham jump in.
Yep.
Thanks, I've gotten my thoughts together on that one. So in other zones, it is my recollection that specifically the downtown neighborhood zone, I think it's not downtown neighborhood, downtown residential zone. Is that what it's called? Like a,
It's downtown neighborhood now.
not the heritage zone, the other that is downtown. What do we call that?
Urban corridors.
What used to be R1,
That's called general residential.
general residential.
Yep.
So how many units are permitted in the general residential zone?
3.
3, and we are permitting 4 in our heritage zone?
That's correct.
It's sort of, okay. I thought we were trying to, I thought we were trying to make our heritage zone less permissible for large number of dwellings. And thereby, and the other zones being more,
No, I think the thinking at the time was, and there was a lot of discussion around this, but the
Yeah.
idea was that there's so many larger homes that restricting it to 3 wasn't always, and if you look at some of the development we've had downtown, like, what's it called, Aviator Place, the one on the corner of Victoria and
yeah, I can
Pleasant,
picture it.
that has 10 units. Oh, sorry. Carriage House is what it's called? Okay, so if you look at that, that has 10 units. I think there's, I think we were also concerned about a development like the old funeral home on Victoria and Faulkner. That building would be really severely restricted if you said you could only do 2 or 3 units in that building. So you'd be limiting reuse potential for that. So we were trying to be as accommodating as possible with the larger, older buildings in the downtown.
Yet restrictive in the general residential to 3.
That was what council wanted, yes. They weren't comfortable going to 4 units in the general residential zone.
Okay, thanks for the refresher.
Yeah.
And just for the purpose of clarification, are we distinguishing between as of right versus, I mean, a development agreement could, like we speak about the funeral home, for example, they could come with an application for more units and be approved. Is that correct or no?
I can't recall. I don't think so. I don't think we had that option in the heritage districts anymore. No. So there's no option for more. So I think it was seen as being that allowance to do that little bit extra, and 4 units was seen to be a reasonable number for a larger home. Okay, where are we now? Sorry, mapping here. Okay, so this is mapping error. So this is just the future growth area map. This is the conceptual plan for the future growth area in the south end of town. You can see William Barnhill Drive here and Young Street's here along the right-hand side. So this was just a concept plan that was included in the document so that if you do development in these areas, that we want to see these connections made, these roadway connections in yellow, and that there's greenway connections, so like potential HE connections that are being made, and also that there's the ravines and things like that are preserved for open space. Excuse me, and potential east-west trail connections as well. So that's what these plans were for. And you're allowed to do all kinds of development in this area, and most of it's by site plan approval, provided you conform with this plan, or you generally conform. The road doesn't have to be in this exact location, but it kind of has to be there. But anyway, the problem with this map in the document was that this chunk of land right here in the current plan is included in the future growth area, but it's not in the future growth zone, nor was it intended to be included. So this needs to be taken out, and that's what this amendment does, is just pull this out of the future growth area and put it into the is it urban growth? Carla, do you remember? I think it's urban growth zone and designation.
Councillor Thomas would like to speak.
Well, he's attempting to answer my question as to what zone will it be in,
Yeah.
and why is it in the urban growth, if that's the zoning, and like why was it put in that area? Why was it pulled out? And then why the additional one on the I guess it's the east side, right by Millbrook First Nations, right? That chunk was added on there.
This piece here?
Yeah, that was added on. From the map that I have in the original here, that strip of land there by Millbrook was added, and the piece of land by Young Street was excluded, and I just...
Right. This was added, though, when the plan... This is not an amendment, because the plan was adopted.
Okay, with that in
this
it.
included, so you just
Okay.
have an older version of the
Okay,
plan.
fair enough. But the
This
Young
piece
Street one...
here, this chunk here has been removed, and that's what this amendment is trying to do, because in the document you have, probably this is showing up as being yellow.
Right, but
Yeah.
why?
Why is it yellow, or why is it...
Why is it being removed? Like, what's special
I believe
about
it was being removed at the time because it was town-owned land that was under purchase and sale agreement, or we were in the middle of... I think we had put it on the market to sell it, and I believe we wanted it to be regional, or did you find urban growth, to allow for a wider range of development options.
Okay. I was just wondering, when I looked at it, I couldn't figure out why you all of a sudden decided...
Yeah, we put this out to tender not that long ago, and I think we have a request for proposals, and I think we have a proposal currently in the works
I've
for
seen it better,
this land.
fits that proposal.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. So this one is this is just to clarify, it's kind of a dangerous lack of the word permitted uses, because when you say all uses in the future growth zone, that could be anything. So we had to make sure that we actually say what's permitted in the future growth zone. So that's just an addition of that word. And this is the addition of solar farms. So it's not really this, some might argue this is kind of a substantive change, but I don't know if it is, because these uses would be consistent, because wind turbines and things like that are permitted. But we're just wanting to make sure that solar farms are clearly in there, as opposed to being sort of left open to interpretation. So this is an amendment to add solar farms to both the rural residential and the watershed residential zones.
Councillor Thomas?
Yeah, I would just like to comment on this. I'm not sure that they are the same as wind farms. I know that wind farms, you know, the footprint of a wind farm is not as big as a solar farm. And so, you know, solar farms by nature recall the removal of trees, et cetera. So I'd just like to see a land use map to get an idea of where this area is inclusive and where it is exclusive. Excludes what land it excludes and what it is involved with this. Because I looked on my map, my handy map, and I couldn't see that area as designated, so.
Okay.
On the
Carla,
future use map.
would you be able to bring up the zoning map?
Because it would be helpful so that I understand it, that's all.
So it would be rural residential and watershed residential?
Yes. You know that TV hates dead air, don't you? So someone tell a story or something.
I was going to thank the AV gang for what I think has been a pretty successful first meeting with our new system. So we're dealing with a little technical difficulty right now, but otherwise it's been pretty great.
Oh, you have to plug it in.
All right, so the two zones that are being referenced for solar farms would be the watershed residential and the rural residential zone. So rural residential, I believe, Carla, you're gonna have to look at a totally different area of the plan. You have to scroll down. Oh, okay, but I think if you scroll down to the bottom, inset map there. Okay, so you're looking at, this would be the areas that are being covered here. So watershed residential would be the dark blue, and the rural residential is the brownish color.
Okay. So what's the wisdom there in regards to the watershed residential? You know, trees, et cetera, are very important for retaining water and all those other things. And those will have to be removed for a solar farm. I just think more thinking has to go into this rather than just saying, well, we have wind farms there. You know, the appropriateness of solar farms, I don't think they're, you know, they're synonymous with wind farms. There seems to be some connection there between vegetation and.
Yeah, no, that's fair. We
so-
can take this, set this aside, and for further discussion, do
Yeah,
a little bit
appreciate
more
that.
research. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Wow. It works really well when it's plugged in, Carla. It's seamless. All right. Okay, so the next one there is,
Can you go back for 1 second? The, where it says watershed residential, it also mentions RR, which I think is supposed to be rural residential. Is that, like
Yeah.
over here it says watershed?
oh, it
residential,
should say WR down here, yeah.
Yeah, but
yeah.
that's not part of the plan, this, is it, or?
No, that's just my list of amendments, so that just needed to be changed to WR
Okay.
to match over here. Okay. Oh, so this is number 30. This is the there's a reference here to the hydrologic regions which were removed from the current plan. So that's just taking that out and talking about it's from the floodplain is what's being referenced there. So this is to be consistent with the way the plan is set up. And it's also talking about, it just says fill from outside instead of saying offsite fill. Next one there is the Heritage District. This is the sort of corresponding zoning map amendment to the policy area amendment that we talked about earlier. So again, this just impacts 74 Duke Street to make sure that the zoning map also matches the Heritage Districts, and with the exception of a few properties on Willow Street, and that there is no urban corridor zone applied to a property that's in the Heritage District.
Mr. Fox?
Yep.
I was just wondering, from when we reviewed the section in the earlier part, so was that property always supposed to have been mapped in this way, or has something changed?
No, the property should have always been, any property that's within the Heritage District is supposed to, according to the town's policies, be within the downtown neighborhood zone. So this is just trying to make the policy, make the zoning map align with the policy.
Okay, so it historically has been in the Heritage
Yes,
District?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, another map amendments. These are all map amendments now, just getting to the end. So the next one here is Parks and Open Space Zone has been applied to a property on Bayview Street, which is next to Riverfront Park, but not actually part of the park. It's actually owned by Stanfields. So it's the intent here is that it should be zoned downtown core, which is the same as the other privately held properties on Bayview Street, and actually even some town-owned properties, because I think we own a few over here, or we used to. Maybe we don't anymore. So all the properties in Bayview zone downtown core. This is just meant to reflect that change. So that's 25 Bayview. Next one, and I should say there is no corresponding to this one, no corresponding policy area map change, because the policy area map, which is the sort of the future land use designations, aren't being changed. They are going to remain parks and open space, because I think the long-term intent is that this whole area would become green space. So that's all. Next one there is the there's just a mapping error where there was some lands that the town owns that were adjacent to the golf course and adjacent to McClure's Brook, that we wanted it to be, it was zone commercial recreation. And this is also the little warehouse the town has, Parks and Rec, on Willow Street. And this is Robertson over here, Robertson Crescent, Lockhart, Lower Truro Road. And this is the old Dominion, the DAR line, the Dominion Atlantic Railway line, or Cobequid Trail. So the idea is that it's not meant to be commercial recreation. That was just a zone mistakenly applied to these because it was adjacent to the golf course. It should have been zone parks and open space, which is what's being proposed on the bottom map there. And then the next ones are a bit complicated because they're hard to see, but essentially what happened was we had an error on the flood elevation data that we received from CBCL. So that was the consultant who did the floodplain study for us. So there's some errors on that mapping. And when the mapping was prepared in 2023, we used the incorrect data to delineate the 1 in 100 and 1 in 20 flood elevations. So these need to be updated to using the correct mapping data, which has since been provided by CBCL. And these are pretty minor changes, but they do impact the mapping a little bit. And it's mostly, I guess I should say, depending on your perspective, for the better. So you'll see in the sense of for the better, in the sense that there's areas that were in the 1 in 100 flood elevation that shouldn't have been. And so you'll see some changes like this area here, which is actually also really close to the area we just looked at on the Cobequid Trail, because this is Lockhart, this is Lower Truro Road. Wade Road is over here. The golf course would be off to the north. So there's just this is, I think, Amera, or I think it's Amera Nova Scotia Power. Someone has like I don't know, like a outdoor storage area there. But it just shows that because of the mapping error, the 1 in 100 flood elevations are actually a lot higher than they should have been. So there's some areas that have been opened up to that they're actually not within the floodplain and shouldn't be shown as such. So that's why the mapping is being changed there. So you see there's a pretty big change here. Some stuff that is no longer in the 1 in 100 flood elevation, same as over here as well. Any questions about that one? And similarly, we also have the same thing. This is the West Prince, or the island. So you can see that, again, there's a lot of areas that are showing up on the existing map that aren't in fact, shouldn't in fact be within the 1 in 100 flood elevation. So there's areas along the ball fields, for example, that are not in the 1 in 100 or below the 1 in 100 flood elevation. So all around the new ball field off Argus Drive. And then you'll see, again, some minor changes over in this area where actually in this case you see some increase in the 1 in 100 in this area. So subtle changes. You can see here there's been a couple areas that have been removed. And this would be, that would be the golf course as well, down here. And behind Truro, or Kingston Aluminum also has an area that's been pulled out of the floodplain as well.
Councillor Graham?
Only as it relates to an upcoming agenda item when we're talking about Juniper Street. Are you able to comment on what the changes will be or how this new information will affect Juniper Street specifically?
The Juniper Street property is right here.
Oh.
So on the existing map, it's pretty much all 1 in 20, and with maybe a small little bit that might be 1 in 100. On the proposed map, it's actually, with the new mapping, it's still all primarily 1 in 20. So there's no real change there. There's just a little bit of difference along this property line here.
So for those at home who may be listening, could you just give us a quick overview of what that tells us, or what the 1 in 120, 1 in 100 means specifically as it relates to Juniper?
There is no significant change as it impacts with this mapping as it relates to Juniper Street property.
So it says it's 1 in 20
Yeah.
flood overlay. Could you just, for anybody
so
who's viewing?
The 1 in 20 is just a ratio expressing the risk of, so it's a flood risk area. So you have a 5% chance at any given time of this property being underwater.
Thanks.
Okay. And when I say underwater, water on the property. So it may be a centimeter, it may be 6 feet or whatever, but it is definitely in a flood condition, I guess is what is being stated. So the next one there is the more map amendments. So this would be Churchill Street, so Churchill, Roby. So there's just some changes here as well. And I think mostly it's properties that have been, for the most part, that shouldn't be in the 1 in 100 and have been removed from the 1 in 100 is what we're looking at, I think. Yeah. So it's a slight decrease in the area that's 1 in 100.
These property owners, I just was wondering if it affects individual property owners and then individual property owners' insurance rates. I mean, if an individual property owner was under the impression, or the insurance company was under the impression that they were in a flood zone and now no longer in a flood zone in the 1 in 100, how are they going to be notified, or does it affect their insurance rate? It was my understanding that there's an effect on insurance rates.
Well, there
Insurance policy.
might be an impact on the insurance rates. I honestly don't know how often the insurance companies in Truro actually check to see the floodplain mapping. We don't get a lot of inquiries about it, I'll be honest with you.
Okay.
So I would be very surprised if anyone had their insurance rates adjusted between when this plan was adopted and now due to the higher flood elevations.
Thank you for that.
And then the final, I think this is the final one. Yep. So the final map change. This is CEC. is here. This is the Regional Center for Education offices here, or the school board offices. Superstore is here. You can see Roby Street here. This would be Crescent Drive. So there again, we're looking at some minor changes to the flood elevations, and it looks like there's a number of properties that are showing up as being, there's like a little bit here that's been removed. And it's very, very minimal change. I think some down here that's been removed as well. So that's down in the Babel Marsh, I believe it's called. So down in that area behind Superstore. So those are the changes that you'd be looking at.
Councillor McGrath?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Fox, I know I'm struggling a little bit. It sounds like you're struggling a little bit. When we present this to the public, is it possible to add a couple of extra colors to show the changes that have been made? So, I don't know, yellow or green or something, say, hey, this is what used to be and now is not, and this is what was not and now is, like, just to sort of highlight those changes a little better?
Yeah, that's no problem.
Because good. I was afraid that was going to be an onerous task.
Well, I'm saying that, but it's Amanda Bent who has to do the work. But she may say it's a bit of a problem, but I think it's certainly doable to highlight the differences without too much trouble.
Yeah, I think it would save everyone a lot of grief in the long run if it's clearer, especially when we present this to the public. Thank you.
Okay, so that's it. So just in terms of next step, we talked about this a little bit already, but so the next step would be for staff to arrange a public information session, and we should probably agree upon the date of that session at this meeting. And what will happen at that meeting is we'll give a presentation similar to what you've seen here. And at the next meeting, this committee would, maybe not the next meeting, but at a subsequent meeting, the committee is going to review the results from the public information session. And what we would be looking for would be a recommendation from this committee for council to adopt the proposed amendments. Then council would actually hold a public hearing, and then council would make a decision on the amendments. And again, as I mentioned, there is no appeal process associated with a plan amendment application or proposal to amend the planning documents. And that is my report or my presentation, respectfully submitted.
Thank you. Just a question there, Mr. Fox. So we'll discuss the date for the public information meeting, and then it comes back to this committee. And will you be providing information that was gathered at that public information meeting?
Yes.
Okay. So, in terms of what will be provided to the public, am I correct that it was only numbers 28 and 29 that I think were kind of removed from what would be provided to the public, or will those items come back to the committee before that public information session takes place?
I think what I would like is probably need a motion of the committee to when you make a motion to proceed with the public information meeting that the committee recommends that those two be removed, or moves that those two be removed from any material presented to the public. And you can also add the motion that the mapping be updated to clarify the distinction between the existing and proposed floodplain mapping.
Okay, thanks. Oh, I've gone black. Councillor Thomas, I'll give you the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'm just wondering about, is this a request for information from the town planner? I just was wondering whether this committee could have a session in which the engineer for the town could go over just this whole idea about flood-proofing, the cut and fill, flood-proofing, the floodway fringe, and all those specifics. They're quite technical, and I believe that the whole committee could really benefit, in particular because we're approaching some development agreements within the floodplain, and it would be very good if we all had an understanding of the technical requirements that need to be met to flood-proof, and that whole idea of cut and fill, right, out of the same
Yeah,
hydrogeological
so I'm
zone.
happy to make a presentation at a later date to,
Yeah, that's what I'm
probably
asking
not
for.
part of this amendment process, hopefully.
Correct.
Yeah, we
I'm
can,
just asking that for the committee.
Yep.
So that the committee has an understanding. So
Absolutely.
that when we look at some of these development agreements that might be coming to us,
Yep.
that we have a greater understanding of what it means to flood-proof and how you flood-proof and its effect, the overall effect on the flooding of the town or the,
well,
floodplain.
so some of what you're asking might be a little bit beyond even, like, I'm not gonna be able to tell you much about I can tell you what our approach is, how we do it, but as far as the effect and all, like, if I get too far into the engineering side of things or the modeling, because there's all kinds of computer modeling that goes into making these maps, I'm not gonna be able to give you much on that end of things, but I can certainly tell you about what our requirements are, what our process is.
Well, I'll leave it with you
Yeah.
as far as what you think this committee needs to make a proper,
Yep.
informed decision.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, so back to the motion. Unless there's further discussion, someone certainly can put a motion on the table regarding where we are with the housekeeping reports, or sorry, housekeeping changes to the planning strategy and land use bylaw. Councillor McGrath?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't think we have a proposed motion to base this off yet, do we? So,
Start from scratch.
starting from scratch, I would like to make the motion that the committee adopt the amendments as presented with the corrections to remove items number 28 and 29 from the land use bylaws section, as well as to make updates to the floodplain mapping to clarify what has been added and removed.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Thank you, Ms. Delorier. Is there any further discussion? If someone would like to call for the question. Okay, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any contrary minded, signify by saying nay. Any abstentions? Nope, motion carried. In terms of the date for that public information meeting,
At this point, I'm thinking, given our proximity to the holidays, it's gonna probably be a January meeting, so we could do it as part of the regularly scheduled PAC meeting. It can be held just before or just after, or we can do two, I guess, before and after, but that would probably be my recommendation. We just do it following the meeting, or sorry, before the meeting.
so invite the public to come to the presentation here.
Yeah, it would be a presentation to the public. It wouldn't be a formal meeting, so we would have to have that. Then we would move into the regular meeting of the committee. I don't think there's any reason why we couldn't do that. So whatever the last Monday in January is, someone can tell me what that is. 27th.
Okay. Angela, you made note of that? I did. Okay, great. So the next item on the agenda is the item added by Councillor Graham regarding the application for the development on Juniper Street. So I will hand the mic to her.
Well, as the councillor for Ward 1, in which the proposed development at 60 Juniper Street is applying, I've been meeting with residents and I've been listening to their concerns, one of which is the potential for flooding in the West Prince Street neighborhood. To address the concerns, I think it would be appropriate to ask the developer for more details around their stormwater management and flood mitigation plan. So essentially having them submit their stormwater management plan to this committee. So I'd like to move that the developer provide the stormwater management plan and flood mitigation details for this committee's consideration prior to the Planning Advisory Committee making its recommendation to council.
Thank you, Councillor Graham. So that motion is on the floor. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Thank you. Councillor McGrath. Would there be some discussion from the committee? I see.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Fox, how technical are the stormwater management plans? Or like, maybe I need to ask Councillor Graham her intent. Is it for the committee to review or just to ensure that this is, that it is done before the recommendation is made so that the engineers can review?
Yeah, I think what you'd be looking for, they are quite technical in nature, so there's a lot of calculations. Usually it's calculations about runoffs and there's tables and yeah, it can be quite complicated. So normally what we do is we forward them to the engineering department, and Jared Bent in our engineering department reviews them and make sure they meet our compliance, and then make sure that what the engineer, because they're stamped engineer drawings, make sure that what they're showing is feasible and consistent with our requirements. And then they usually indicate to us whether or not that they're acceptable to move forward, and that's what we take to council. Usually when we need to indicate if we've received them, it's usually we've received one that's acceptable to the town engineering department.
Okay, because that's a helpful clarification, because among the many things I am not is an engineer or hydrological engineer. I don't want to have it on me to review these documents and provide any sort of approval, but I am supportive, especially in light of the residents' concerns, that to have the engineering department sign off on that prior to the passing that to council. Thank you.
I think also there's a desire from the community to have access to those plans, and I think I should have made that more clear in my motion that if I'm not sure what is the accessibility to those documents to the community once they're submitted to this committee. Do they have access at that point?
Yeah, we can make any of the plans accessible to anyone who wants to see them. It's no problem.
Does it need to be part of the motion? Or
No,
is
that's-
that a par
that's
for the course?
Typical for us. If anyone has anyone's asking for information about any development application, we'll provide them copies of the information. It may not be able to give them copies of the information because it might be plans that are printed, but we can certainly make them available to them. And if we have them digitally, we may be able to share those as well.
Great, because I think the community was very interested in reviewing them as well. Thank you.
Just to be clear, Mr. Fox, they would not be on the website similar to a development agreement?
No, not typically, because they tend to be pretty large files, and a lot of the information is pretty meaningless to most people as well. It's a lot of tables and things like that, but we can certainly make what we have available like in the office and then potentially digitally.
Any other discussion on the motion that's before the committee? Councillor Thomas.
I'm just not clear as to the benefit of having that material known, because the engineer has to design a stormwater management plan that meets the policy. And so it's the policy really that needs to be looked at. What is the policy, and a clear understanding of what the policy is around stormwater management and the handling of stormwater. I think that's the question. And I think that can be clearly described just by the town planner as to what is required. But I'm just not sure, because I think they're quite technical, and I'm not sure they're going to show its effect downstream of putting a building on that corner. What is the effect downstream of the movement of water? And I'm not sure. I don't know enough about it myself, stormwater management reports, because I really have never seen one. But I can't imagine that it does that. I think what it does is it meets the requirements set out by the town. It ensures that the stormwater that's on that property will, will meet the requirements in policy in regards to the movement of stormwater off that property. And that's all that it'll show. So I'm not quite sure the benefit of what you're asking. I don't, it's not clear to me as to what the benefit is, but perhaps I just don't understand. So Mr. Fox, can you bring some clarity to that? Or
Well, as I understand the motion, I think what you're looking for is to have those submitted, the plans, the stormwater management plan, flood mitigation plan submitted prior to making a decision. And what you'd probably want to hear from staff, from the town engineer and from planning is that the proposed plans meet policy and that the engineer is satisfied that what's shown is feasible and also meets our policies.
But we can't move forward. We can't move. Council, in its motion, says that the project cannot move forward unless it meets those stormwater management policy criteria. So I'm not quite sure what you're trying to achieve, that's all. I'm not being critical, I'm just trying to understand what you're trying to achieve. Does it give any more assurance to the neighborhood in regards to stormwater management than?
I think it's meant to give this committee the assurance that that's been addressed before because council has, or this committee and council has the option of receiving stormwater management plans and flood mitigation plans at any time.
Right.
If you feel that if the committee is quite confident that this can meet it no problem at all, then yeah, you should.
It's my understanding the project will not go forward unless it can meet those criteria. So
correct.
That's when I do that in good faith.
Yeah.
And it's always been that way. It's done in good faith. And I don't have any evidence that it's a development agreement has ever gone forward that doesn't meet the criteria. And so I have complete faith in the town that when council or this committee requests that it meets stormwater management criteria, that it will meet it. The project, will not go forward unless it meets it, because I have no evidence that that has ever happened, that a project has gone forward without meeting it. So I have full faith in the process. So that's why I'm questioning it. So I'll leave it at that, though. People can vote as they choose.
Councillor Graham, did you want to respond?
Well, just to say that it was at the request of our residents, and this is a particularly interesting and interesting development as it affects the residents of West Prince in a very unique way, not only for the flooding, but there have been other issues. I think that it is incumbent on us to respect the wishes of the residents who have made this request formally to me and to other members of council, that it not move forward without this committee having seen the stormwater management plan and without residents of West Prince having access to those plans as well. It was very important to the community. And I would like to respect those wishes. It's not without precedence, as my colleague pointed out to me. Stanfield's made their stormwater management plans readily available to the community prior to it coming before council, and I think we're looking for the same courtesy in this case.
It wasn't, not that I know was it requested, that was just given in good faith by the developer to provide that to council, because I guess they felt as though there would be a question in that regard. So, yeah. I'm not opposed to the question, I just don't quite see how the full benefit of the request.
Councillor McGrath.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Fox, I happen to have with me the checklists for development agreements, and I've been looking frantically through just trying to find out. I know it happens after the public hearing and usually the vote of council that we confirm where the storm management plan has happened, and the development agreements that I've been privy to so far in my short time on council. I know the stormwater management plan is usually after the public hearing, after council has made its vote. The vote is usually we approve conditional on the approved stormwater management plan. Are you able to just help me out here on where the approval of the stormwater management plan is in these checklists, just for my own benefit, I guess?
It can, I'm not sure where it is on the list, but it can be at any point in the process. Council and this committee, according to the town's policies, are allowed to ask for a lot of information, a variety of different types of information in their deliberations. So you can ask for a stormwater management plan as this committee at any time, and you can require that as part of your application requirements in order to consider the development. You can, that's all in policy. I don't have the actual policy in front of me, but it's probably under the development agreement section and the implementation section of the plan, that this committee and council are both allowed to ask for that information.
Okay, thank you. I just think that, I mean, I would like to see the stormwater management plan. I think would help put a lot of people at ease. I mean, what I see right now when I go down and look at that site is a parking lot. It is pretty much 100% impermeable surface. It would not take much, I don't think, to improve the stormwater management of a parking lot. But perhaps throughout this process, and knowing the importance that the nearby residents are putting on this, will impress upon the developer to make sure that they are perhaps going above and beyond to ensure that more stormwater is managed and improves the situation in that area. But I do see, as you know, it is a parking lot at 100% impermeable where they're going to be developing. I can't see that they can't possibly make that at least a little bit better. Thank you.
I agree that the residents' concerns are very important to Councillor Graham. It is her district, her ward. And I think the motion is certainly brought for the benefit of the constituents, but I agree with Councillor Thomas that if the report is provided without any review by staff and engineer beforehand and without any information provided to the committee, we might just be provided with something that we are sort of tasked to review, but we may not have the best information. So maybe we could put it to staff to have that reviewed and provide some comments from staff and from engineering so that we can understand the plan, not just be provided with it, if that's agreeable to the committee.
I think that's a good amendment. I think that maybe my amendment could be adjusted to say that the committee, that the plan be made available and the details given to this committee and the Director of Public Works for review prior to it being submitted to council for approval. So I can redo that whole motion if you like, or what's the process?
I'm not sure if Angela was able to capture that for the record of the motion. So if you want to start again, Councillor Graham and Councillor McGrath, you can consider whether you'll still second the motion, the revised motion.
So I would move that the developer provide stormwater management plans and flood mitigation details for this committee's consideration for this committee's consideration and the consideration of the Director of Public Works prior to this committee making its recommendation to council. And and that the Director of Public Works provide a layman's report to this committee prior to it going to council.
Well, someone might want to let the Director of Public Works know he's part of the motion, but I think the point is valid, that it's provided and that staff has an opportunity to review and attend the meeting and discuss it with the committee.
Do you think maybe you need to read it back to us now, Angie?
I don't know if I'd be very good at it. The developer to provide a stormwater management plan and mitigation for this committee to consider or then they changed it, to be reviewed and approved by the Director of Public Works prior to going to public hearing.
I think we missed the part.
Oh, we missed it.
I think we missed a part there, that the Director of Public Works provide a briefing to this committee.
By the briefing.
Should it be, would that briefing be open to the public? Will it be as part of this, a regular PAC meeting?
I think it would come forward as part of the regular PAC deliberations, so.
Okay,
Yeah.
important for the residents to be able to hear that as well.
Yeah, so open to the public, open to residents, open to the developer. I think that makes sense for everyone's involvement.
Yep.
Okay, Councillor McGrath, did you want to second that motion? I will second that motion. Okay, any further discussion? Okay, I don't think I'm going to be able to repeat it, so I will say the motion as put forward by Councillor Graham regarding the development on Juniper Street, specifically the stormwater management plan. All those in favor of the motion as presented by Councillor Graham and seconded by Councillor McGrath, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed to the motion, please signify by saying nay. Any abstentions? Motion carried. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is new business. Does anyone have any new business to bring before the committee? Oh, well, that was, so then if there is no new business, we can discuss the next meeting date, which, Mr. Fox, you had discussed might possibly be December 16th, and that was specifically for 2 applications.
Yeah, so normally the committee does not meet in, I shouldn't say normally, we rarely have met in December due to the holidays, so because the meeting typically falls on the last Monday of the month, so that usually lands dead center in the middle of the holidays. So what we have typically done in the past is not held a meeting. When we've held a mid-December meeting. We have 2 applications that are both trying to make it. They wanted to make it to this committee, but their consultants weren't able to get their stormwater management plans in place, and they're both floodplain developments. So both of them will require details around stormwater management, flood mitigation. And they're trying to get those ready. They weren't able to make it this meeting. They've requested that we hold a meeting in both applications. Have requested that we hold the meeting in December so that they can make it to that before the holidays. So we're looking for I think the date that works would have been December 16th. I think the Friday before or the Monday before that's too soon to be useful to them, and after that we're too close to the holidays. So I think we were looking at the 16th as being the sort of the most appropriate date.
Any discussion on that? Just my own discussion. The discussion we just had regarding the Juniper Street development, will that be communicated to the applicant immediately? And will that possibly come into play as to whether they wish to meet with the committee as soon as December 16th?
Yep, it will. So I'll send an email tomorrow just following up on the discussion that was had tonight. And we'll give them a clarified version of the motion and ask them to provide those details prior to the December 16th meeting. And if they're not able to meet that, then they won't be on the agenda.
Okay, so we'll tentatively set that next meeting for December 16th.
Sorry, will we be restricting them from attending if they can't come with what if they had other issues to discuss, or if they had other items that need consideration? I don't know that we need to restrict them from coming if they can't meet the obligation of the stormwater management.
I think what we would look at in that case is what information was being brought forward. If it was still worthy of having the meeting, have a discussion with the chair, and we'll let everybody know if there's going to be a meeting or not.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, if there's nothing else to come before the committee, then someone can make a motion to adjourn. Okay. Thank you. Meeting adjourned.